So, welcome everyone to Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us today. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm that's dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real-world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow those instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Rich Shea, the CEO of Basking Biosciences. Rich joined Basking Bio as CEO shortly after its founding in 2019. He's an experienced life sciences entrepreneur and has been involved in the creation and growth of multiple life science startup and growth companies over the last 20 years. He began his career at Merck. Rich has also received his MBA from Duke University and his bachelor's degree from a Bachelor's of Sciences from the University of Notre Dame. Go Irish. Prior to attending
Go
Duke,
Irish.
Rich served for 5 years as a submarine officer in the U.S. Navy. And when not running Basking Bio, Rich enjoys traveling, spending time with family rather at the beach, and with family in general, as well as their 10-month-old granddaughter. So welcome, Rich, to the podcast.
Thanks, Don. Great to see you again, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we'll get started up, Rich, with your career journey and basically your leadership philosophy. So, coming from, a submarine commander, what inspired your journey into the life sciences industry?
Well, it's interesting, Don. So, I went to Duke after I resigned my active duty commission in the Navy. So, I obviously hadn't had a lot of exposure to the business world. So I spent my time at Duke and uh, kind of late in my time there, I wasn't intending to go into the life sciences industry. But I met two gentlemen, one from Merck and one from Johnson and Johnson. Both had attended the service academies. One West Point, the other Annapolis, and collectively they talked me into. It really educated me on the mission of the pharmaceutical industry, how you could really make a meaningful difference in people's lives, and coming from a military background, that really resonates. The opportunity to be part of a mission that's bigger than yourself. And so both offered me positions. I decided to go to Merck. And so really kind of am in the industry, I think a little bit of serendipity, a certainly non-traditional background. But I've really, really enjoyed my time over the last close to 30 years.
That's great, Rich. I wonder if you can share pivotal moments in your career that maybe led you up to your present role at Basking Biosciences. Go through some of your journey, if you will.
Yeah, I think, and this is probably not intuitive, but spending a number of years in service on a submarine was actually great training for biotech. You are under the water for extended periods of times with about 120 other people and a mission to accomplish and basically no help. You have the spare parts you have the people you have, and you have to execute against that mission. So you learn to be very adaptive, flexible, um, uh, look ahead. And, I think a lot of those, there's a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity in the biotech world as well. And so, I think a lot of those lessons that I learned very early in my career ended up being very beneficial. And another thing I picked up was as a junior officer in a submarine, the real focus is on preparing you to be the commander of the ship, right? So you don't spend an inordinate amount of time becoming the best, say, electrical officer ever to serve on a submarine. You learn each area, but you also importantly learn how they integrate and uh, develop a sense of the bigger picture. And if I make a decision here, what's the knock-on effect potentially in what's nominally an unrelated area? And so when I went into the pharmaceutical industry, I approached it the same way. So over my years, I've prior to having the opportunity to serve as a leader of a number of companies, I've worked in early development, clinical development, manufacturing, supply chain, and commercialization. So, I've really seen from, very, very early lab bench work being translated all the way through to launching products. And, uh, that's really invaluable in terms of informing how I think about things today and where I focus on, because a trial we run today or even a preclinical work we do today may ultimately inform the label we have at commercialization. And at the same time, we're out there talking to payers and providers already, trying to understand what data they need to see to be enthusiastic about the technology that we're developing. So that integrated understanding of the bigger picture was something that the value of that was impressed upon me very early, and it's how I've approached my career in the industry.
That's great, Rich. Really interesting parallels between life underwater and life above water, if you will. How, if at all, has your leadership philosophy evolved over the years? I mean, obviously, the U.S. Navy, Merck are larger, obviously larger organizations, and you're leading a smaller biotech, I suppose, at this point. How has that philosophy for you evolved, I suppose, over the years?
I don't know that it's changed so much because a submarine is a very, very small unit that operates pretty independently, albeit in a very large umbrella organization. But it's really reinforced and strengthened my you know, commitment to an understanding that it's the people who get the job done. So, and you spend enough time in this industry, you develop a network, and I'm really blessed to be working now at Basking Biosciences with a number of our team. Yeah, I've worked with some of those relationships go back 20, 25 years. And so the ability to um, bring the right group of people together that's aligned with the mission of the organization and then let them execute. I don't believe in, we set the mission, we, have a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, but day-to-day execution, I'm really blessed because I know that's going to happen in a high quality and consistent way. And it's the relationships you foster over many years that bring people back together, and I think are fundamental to the success, especially in a small organization like Basking, where there isn't a lot of people, and we're currently running a multinational study, including sites, soon Australia, North America, soon to be Asia and Europe, with a very small team primarily based here in the US.
That's great. Really super overview. Let's talk a little bit about basking itself then, Rich, and the innovations and trends generally in acute thrombosis treatment. Your lead asset, BB031. If you could explain to everyone a bit about how that works and the key challenges, I suppose, it addresses in treating
Sure.
acute ischemic stroke. Yeah,
So BB31 is designed to be a rapid onset, short acting, and reversible uh, therapy for acute blood clots. So step back to the highest level why. Uh, 1 in 4 of us will, unfortunately, today still die of an acute blood clot. And that number was not dissimilar 25 years ago. So the incidence rate of death has gone down, but the population's grown. So the net impact of acute blood clots is still, a alongside cancer, the definition of a very, very high unmet need. There have been advancements in the space, broadly speaking. So ischemic stroke is a form of acute thrombosis. It's a clot in the brain. But heart attack, pulmonary embolism, etc., are other manifestations, and they all kill a lot of people. So the need, when you look at the treatments that are available, there's been a lot of progress on the device side, and to the extent that the chances to really move things forward on that side of things from a if you take a revolutionary perspective, maybe more limited now, and there's a need for more effective pharmacological treatments, which are inherently easier to scale. It's easier to get a drug to people than a device that requires a highly trained surgeon. So, if we look at it, the problems with current there or the challenges is that if you have an acute blood clot, and this is again probably counterintuitive, but the big risk is bleeding. So you can go from a thrombotic state where you have a clot to and you clear that clot and the patient can start to bleed, right? So that's held back the use of alteplase, which is you might notice TPA, which is the currently approved pharmacological treatment in ischemic stroke. In the U.S., maybe 10%, 10 to 12% of patients receive TPA. And it's because of restrictions on its use, and a lot of that's driven by the risk of bleeding. So in BB31, we've developed a first-in-class RNA aptamer. So I think now, after the COVID vaccines, most people are familiar with what RNA is, but it's a synthetic RNA construct that behaves a lot like a monoclonal antibody. So it's very rapid onset, highly target specific, but importantly, because it's a nucleic acid construct, it stays in the body a relatively short time. So you can attack the clot, but know that the drug will clear. Another feature of aptamers is that you can design a reversal oligonucleotide, so a small molecule that binds to and basically disables the aptamer, and this happens very quickly within 5 minutes. And so if you need to turn the drug off because a patient has there is a bleeding event, you can do that. So it's inherently safer, and we think the biology of VWF will prove that it's a better target to what's currently has been the focus in acute thrombosis, which is targeting fibrin.
Gotcha. Excellent. Excellent. You've kind of touched on really, I think, the next question I had, but are there any other ways in which your approach or for BB31, differs from, I suppose, existing therapies in the market?
Yeah, I think the ability to rapidly and reverse the drug is critically important from a safety perspective, and our conversations with clinicians and payers certainly reflect that belief that safety is critically important. I think we're currently running a phase 2, very robust phase 2 clinical trial evaluating BB31 as a monotherapy. So the reversal agent's a little behind in development. It'll go into phase 1 later this year. So BB31 is a monotherapy in ischemic stroke patients, and the data from that trial is designed to both show safety but also prove the biology in a pretty high risk stroke population. So that's once you get to this point, that's what you have to prove. You have to prove your biology translates from animal studies, and that your safety translates from animal studies. And I can say we're still in early phases. I think we've enrolled, it'll ultimately be a 156 patient trial. We're in the teens right now, so we're about 10% there. But so far, so good. We've seen no safety signal whatsoever. And, obviously on the biology side, it's a blinded trial. We don't know that yet. But later in 2026, we'll have that answer. And if it performs as we believe it will be an exciting advance in the field.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I suppose, are there other trends or maybe what trends in, thrombosis treatment are exciting to you right now? What is everyone saying?
You know what? Thrombosis treatment, there's been advances on the device side, particularly in ischemic stroke, with the since in the last 10 years, the advent of mechanical thrombectomy, so the surgical removal of clots from the brain. Great advance. Unfortunately, only available to a rather limited number of patients, and that's partially the availability of neurosurgery specialists to actually perform the procedure, but also you have to have a clot that's close enough that they can actually get to it. So there's kind of mechanical limitation that not every patient's going to be amenable for this procedure, maybe 20-30% maximum. So great advance, helps a lot of people, and it's great to see the field continue to advance. What really has me excited is that over there was a period of 10 to 20 years where on the pharmacology side, there was really a slowdown in investment by industry, and in terms of financing, in terms when you look at new pharmacological therapies for acute thrombotic clinical settings. And that's really changing now, both on the acute side where we operate, but also on the chronic side, where again, industry is investing to explore better new and hopefully better treatments. So on the more chronic care side, there's been significant investment by several companies in factor 11 inhibitors. So most people are familiar with Eliquis and Xarelto, the factor 10 inhibitors. And again, great. They themselves were great advances for AFib, et cetera. The challenge with those drugs is that patients do bleed, and so they have there is a safety side to that story. The hope is that factor 11 inhibitors will be as efficacious, but safer. So it's great to see that investment on the chronic side. And I can tell you on the acute thrombosis side, where we are, there are unfortunately one program just failed in phase 3 last year. That you know you never like to see setbacks like that, but they do happen. That's the industry we operate in. But there are several other approaches that I would call iterations on targeting fibrin, like TPA does, certainly in the ischemic stroke, and to have other entities out there trying different things with solid science behind them is, it's a positive for us all, because as I said, I think 1 in 4 of us on this podcast will suffer a stroke. 1 in 4 of us will ultimately die of an acute blood clot. So the fact that there are more treatments being explored, actively evaluated, is a good thing for the field and for patients.
Absolutely. Uh, let's talk a little bit, Rich, about scaling, funding, and business strategy. What have been the biggest challenges in scaling, I guess, Basking Bio to date, and how have you overcome those?
So, once you have solid belief in your science and you're moving forward, I think every company probably has the same 2 biggest topics on their minds. So one is the team. As I said, I've been thrilled with that aspect, and the other is raising the capital. So, you know, no matter what you're doing, raising capital in life sciences is always a rigorous process, and that's a good thing. It should be fairly Darwinian in that the best ideas and approaches should win out in the end. Very sophisticated investor base. And we raised end of 23 a $55 million round, and that was Um, it was a great outcome. It was a long, hard road. We started that road in second half of 2022, so it took about a year. And for those of you who've been in the industry recently, especially those of you who have been on the fundraising trail, the last few years, 2022 and 2023 were pretty arduous years. Things are trending better right now. It certainly is not a frothy market, but I think you know the overall dynamics are better. But it was a tough time to be out there on the road. And as I said, acute thrombosis and stroke in particular hadn't attracted a lot of private investments. That was an added degree of difficulty in our case. But if you believe in what you're doing and you can communicate that effectively, I do believe you'll eventually be successful. Uh, there's a lot of tenacity and persistence involved, but you have to believe and you have to keep going. And we got it done. We set out to raise 45. We took 55, but we had 65 million in interest. So, it was a great outcome. We have an absolutely tremendous syndicate that supports us now, but has the capacity to support us well into the future as well. So very, very pleased. But I think for most young companies, the capital side of the equation obviously is the biggest mountain to climb.
Yeah, absolutely. Just based on your experience, I was kind of curious. That was really going to be my next question was any advice? This could even transcend Basking Bio, I suppose, with prior companies, but what advice would you give, Rich, to biotech startups, I suppose, early stage development companies that are seeking funding in today's environment?
Um, a couple of things. The obvious thing is tenacity wins. If you believe, then keep driving and don't give up, because you'll find a way. But I think in terms of how do you prepare for that and the way to think about it, I start out every time we go out to raise money by taking a step away from the company and trying to look from the outside in and moving to the other side of the table and sitting in that investor seat and say, what am I worried about with this investment? What do I see as the upside? What are the proof points of validation? Does your plan, are you achieving de-risking milestones that warrant the capital risk? You know, if you have a plan that's purely driven by science, that may be very elegant, but are you getting to a point where you've de-risked the program to the point that you can raise that next round? I think looking at it not only from your perspective, but if you put yourself on the other side of the table and say, okay, I work for my limited partners and I'm going to write a $10 million check to put into this company. How do I justify that to my limited partners? So you have to look at it from both perspectives, um, and then make sure your plan kind of aligns with both your company's development goals, but also addresses as best you can determine what are the pain points for investors, what are they really going to want to get comfortable with, to move forward with your financing.
Great advice. Putting yourself in the investor's shoes
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing there. Super. Let's talk a little bit about the future. You know, how is, and I know we touched on some of this, but how is Basking Biosciences preparing for future challenges and opportunities in thrombosis treatment? Are there other things in the pipeline, maybe that we haven't covered?
Sure. So, as I said, there's many settings of acute thrombosis. So our lead clinical population is ischemic stroke, but there's pulmonary embolism and myocardial infarction and a variety of other peripheral arterial disease, a variety of settings where acute blood clots cause great harm. And so while we're running this trial in stroke, we're actively talking to KOLs in other settings of acute thrombotic care, so mainly cardiologists, as you would guess, um, thinking about, okay, where do we go next in the acute thrombosis world? And there's so many settings down. We started out with 20 some, and we've kind of narrowed it down to three. So as data develops from this trial, we'll be looking to expand indications, and to cross-validate the approach to clot dissolution in other settings, but also, the each of these other areas, obviously, there's still a lot of deaths from heart attack, from pulmonary embolism, et cetera. There still is a very high unmet need. And so we'll be looking, our main focus right now is understanding that based on positive interim data from our current trial, what direction should the program go in next?
That's great. And it sounds like there's a lot of medical education, development, maybe of key opinion leaders. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, we are focused on that. So we target von Willebrand factor, which is a glycoprotein in our blood, and I won't go into a deep biology lesson here, but it's perhaps historically was underappreciated in terms of its prominence in both the formation phase, but also the ongoing stabilization of acute blood clots. And a lot of data has emerged. Obviously, our program, but supported independently by a lot of academic research over the last 20 years, that it is indeed a very important player in this process. And we think it's an ideal target for clot dissolution. And, again, I won't go into the biology side of it on this podcast, but because it hasn't historically been viewed as a prominent player, then, it hasn't been extensively taught in medical schools. Doctors, when they see the data, they get excited, but, there's just kind of a lack of general awareness. And so we've started to um, go out on a more broad basis and uh, talk about BWF biology more broadly, especially in the context of acute thrombosis, um, because that's fundamental to, that's what underpins our whole approach. And, it's something we uncovered in KOL discussions and commercial research with payers and providers, that it's just, there's and, I can tell you also from, the investment process, that it's something you have to educate along the way, because this is not something that everyone's familiar with, everyone knows, and it's just, we're proposing a better way to target something everyone already understands.
Got it. Yeah, definitely novel. Well, as we come kind of into the closing, Rich, I'm curious, are there any final thoughts or advice that you'd like to share with our listeners here today? Anything maybe I've missed or that we haven't covered?
No, I think just about the company itself. Please follow us on LinkedIn and check out our website. There's a great video there showing the biology and mechanism of action that really brings it together. There'll soon be a podcast up there that was done with Mike Gibson at the Baim Institute at Harvard on VWF, so you can learn a little bit about VWF. I think for um, the life sciences folks who are listening, who may be in earlier stages, it's the advice is, it's a long, tough road, but it's worth it. You have the chance to make a meaningful difference in people's lives, and stick it out, because having been down the fundraising trail quite a number of times myself, it's tough, um, but stick it out, because in the end, the mission is worth it.
Absolutely. Persistence is important in the pursuit of human health. Thanks so much, Rich. That wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. I appreciate you tuning in and hope you found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave a review and share it with your network. Please also mark your calendar for March 14th at 2 o'clock with Charles Swindell, the CEO of Glycotestis, who we'll be speaking with next. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.